Hello and welcome to this UpStart webinar on adapting your business to the new normal. I'm Gemma Collins, a business growth enabler with NatWest Cymru. While we're certainly living in extraordinary times, every day is bringing a fresh challenge for our businesses, for workers and for the economy. With me to discuss surviving this incredibly tough time and to look ahead to a new normal are Laura Evans of Unleash Your Potential, Chris Jones of Chris Jones Studio, and Stephen Thompson of Darwin Gray Solicitors. So welcome to you all. Laura, if I could come to you first of all. So you're from Unleash Your Potential and you were also the 2020 winner of the Pivot Entrepreneur for Wales in the Great British Entrepreneur Awards. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it is your business does and how you pivoted this year so well that you caught the eye of the judges?
Yeah, of course. So I run a small training business. Well, I say small, we turn over just short of $250,000, so it's not that small. And I run that in South Wales and have done since 2014. And I think, like many small business owners and entrepreneurs in South Wales, this time last year, a pandemic like this was not even in our thinking. And so I think, like many entrepreneurs, I went very quickly through the panic. But I guess I'm quite lucky in many respects because of the type of training I do, which is mindset training. And so for me, my mindset was absolutely critical. And it was my ability, I think, to steady myself in my business and the team I lead in my business quite quickly, and to be able to go, okay, this has happened, we can't control it, it's outside of our control, and really focus on what we could do, what we could influence, and how we could help our existing customer base, and also continue to attract new people to our business. And that was a massive, and still is a massive, challenge in this current climate for small business owners. And I guess I'm lucky compared to some of the people in your community here that are literally at startup phase, in that I have got a good few years behind me. So I had an existing customer base, but just servicing that was never going to cut the mustard. We needed to not just survive, but we needed to thrive. If it's okay with you, I'm going to quote one of the judges that led to me getting the award. And one of the judges from the Great British Entrepreneur complimented me on my drive, my determination, and particularly my ability to respond quickly, to seize the opportunity within the chaos, and to set plans to not only back myself. And that was a big thing they were talking about, which is, this ability of entrepreneurs to vouch for themselves, and put everything into that. And I think that was really important. And I think, I was talking to a group of entrepreneurs just last week, and they asked me a similar question, what was it? And I think one of the key attributes for entrepreneurs in the current climate is their ability to innovate and create, and be creative. And I think, at the time of this recording, very recently, we've had the announcement of the Arcadia Group going into administration. And that to me is a classic example, sad as it is to hear 13,000 people at risk of redundancy. That was kind of inevitable because of the way that business was run. And obviously I can only comment on what's in the public domain. I don't know Sir Philip Green or anything like that, but I think his ability, he failed to invest for the future. He failed to take his business online. He failed to, really focus and position that business for the future, and very much positioned for now. And I think that was a big error on his part and on the part of many other businesses. And I think that's where, as small business owners, we are absolutely in our element. One thing we are great at is pivoting on a sixpence, as my father would have put it. We can twist and turn and pivot so quickly. There aren't big barriers like in big organizations to do that. And I think, so for me, I think what really caught the judge's attention, and I think what has really put me in good stead, is my mindset, my ability to get myself in a good place, my ability to pivot, be innovative and creative about how I serve existing and new customers, and the speed at which I could act. I think they're some of the key things.
Story. Steve, if I can come to you, Darwin Gray as a law firm specialises in supporting SMEs. Those attributes that Laura has just talked about there, is that something that you've seen in your clients this year?
I think so, because I mean it has been difficult, as Laura says, for a lot of businesses, and we were expecting to have, as a law firm, and we're what we call a general commercial law firm, so we do lots of different things, and we were expecting to be super quiet very quickly, but actually we got quite busy, and admittedly a lot of that was employers wanting advice on what's furlough all about and all that kind of thing. But there has been quite a lot of activity, and it's been interesting. In addition to looking after our sort of day-to-day clients with their needs, we have had a number of inquiries from businesses that have gone down routes that have been basically created by the pandemic. So, you know, I'm helping a client at the moment who's potentially sourcing medical equipment for a sort of quasi-government body. And there's been lots of examples where clients have had to get into new things and really go for new opportunities. So you've got clients who do one thing, like Laura says. So, I mean, I think pivot's is got to be added to the list of new pandemic business buzzwords, isn't it? Because if somebody said to me in March, I'm thinking of pivoting my business, I'm not quite sure what I would have thought that would have meant, but we all know now, don't we? But certainly there's been a lot of clients that have had to adapt what they do and change things around and respond to opportunities. And I guess it's easier for some than others, isn't it? I mean, if you run a pub, it's more difficult to pivot. I mean, you do your best you can, you do the takeaway food, you sell beer through the, you know, the window and all that kind of thing. But if you have got the opportunity to do something different, then you would do, wouldn't you? And I think if you are entrepreneurial, like Laura clearly is, then you were going to take the opportunity and you're going to run with it. And I think that's what certainly a lot of our clients have done.
Chris, if I come to you, you're a place practitioner with a lot of experience of helping towns and high streets put themselves on the map and make a success of themselves. Right. Laura's just mentioned the really sad news in the last 24 hours of Arcadia's entering into administration, and also hot on the heels of that, the implications that's got for Debenhams as well. With this kind of news coming thick and fast, what do you think is the outlook for our Welsh high streets?
I think before COVID started, we were about managing declines and we were going through a period of transition. Certainly retail was about consolidation. We had too many units on the high street. And as Laura said, you know, for me, size does not matter. It's about things that, that have that personality, that are local, that feels connected, that you sort of belonging. And I think whilst it's sad about those jobs and those families and that income, I think it's about that experience. And I'm sure what Laura gives through her sort of, through her business is about connecting with people. The same with Steve in terms of what he gives, his personal service. So for me, it's about certainly about keeping things local. I think out of COVID, it's come about well-being as well, about the well-being of place, well-being of people. We were about to start that repurposing sort of agenda. It's been accelerated, and I think there are going to be some casualties. But for me, in the last 9 months, I've, like Laura, I've gone through a rebrand, and I'm trying to think about my audience and about my values. So I think about the high street in Wales, it's all about our personality, about art, about culture, about language. You know, we are a small nation as well. We can be agile. We can move really quickly. But I also think, certainly from COVID, there's a blend of bricks and clicks and also trips, I call it. So to give you use one example, my fruit and veg grocer in the market here during COVID went from their stall during lockdown, and they were doing 140 trips a week, and they were home deliveries. And I think there's a change in model here where people are becoming more agile, are getting a blend of both physical and also digital. And also for me, I'm sat here in an office in Abergavenny, 3 stories up, and I've got in this building, I've got an artist, I've got a coffee shop that makes amazing cakes. You can smell them now. And, you know, for me, that whole model's changing. I've chosen to actually work in this town, yeah. And I think, as we all know, it's about agile working, about co-working, or working from home, having a few days in the office. So I think that whole mosaic of towns now, it is changing. And I think it's actually, well, for me, about time. You know, these things were going to happen. And certainly COVID, as I've said, has really picked things up for us. So I think whilst there's some pain, I think there will be some long-term gain out of this.
Can I just chip in on the back of that?
Yeah,
I was listening to the radio this morning, and they had the former chief exec of Debenhams on, and they were asking him about, you know, obviously what's going to happen with Debenhams, but also the future of the high street.
Yes.
And he was saying quite interestingly that, you know, when the banks started leaving the high street a number of years ago, everybody was panicking about what would happen then. And of course, those spaces just filled up with something new, didn't they? Coffee shops or all sorts
social
of
space. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about what you say, Chris. It's about that repurposing, isn't it? And the fact that there's always going to be change, but it will end up looking different. But, you know, there will be something there. It's not just hopefully going to be, or I mean, I'm sure there will be some high streets that won't look great, but a lot of the time, as you say, more social space and a repurposing of the space that's there for other reasons.
And I think also it's about one size fits all approach in some places, but actually you've got to be unique as well. So, you know, just one thing quickly, in Wales, we've got 2 high streets of the year, and that's Treorchy and Crickhowell, yeah? That's in the whole of the UK, yeah? So I think there's something there about learning from each other as well. So you've got a real sort of valleys town that has got a real rich story about Italian cafes, yeah, about great corner shops, about the Park and Dare, you know, sort of hall and all that. So I think we need to learn from each other as well. And your point there, Steve, is definitely right about where things start to really decline. Use some imagination and sort of be creative, as Laura said. Yeah, just think a bit differently.
I think as well, if I can just come in on the back of that, I think sometimes, as uncomfortable as enforced change is, sometimes that is what some businesses need, you know. And I think, you know, it's very easy to become complacent in a business. It's very easy to become complacent with an existing customer base, to become complacent about how you do your business, and it is uncomfortable, and in this crisis has been particularly scary for a lot of us at times, but actually it's forced some of us to really consider our business. I mean, if I take my business, for example, you know, most of my courses are delivered face to face. However, in 2017, I recorded a suite of online courses and I did nothing really with them. They were sat on the back burner, not earning me anything, not really doing anything. And then all of a sudden, the lockdown happened on whatever day it was, 23rd of March. And I was like, right, come on, girls and girls, we got to find a way to make some money here. I know what we'll do. We'll dust off and relaunch the online course, you know, at courses. And in the space of 10 days, long nights, but again, this is the advantage of small business, 10 long days and nights, I relaunched my online courses, and I took $5,000 in 3 weeks right at the beginning of lockdown. Yeah. So I do think that there is sometimes, as you say, Chris, there is sometimes some benefit that does come from enforced change, as in you got to do something, because if you don't, you're going to be left behind. And I think that's really interesting.
I think there's been a cycle. We had retail you're back in the 80s, we had retail parks and out of town, didn't we? So the plan has let that happen slightly, about growth. And then we started to look at how can we repurpose and sort of reanimate the high street. That's where we were. And now we've come to another watershed moment, haven't we? Which is, to me, about our well-being. So COVID has really given us that lens around sort of our health, our well-being, the fact that we can't come together and socialise, you know. It's made us really value, you know, as human beings, what we want from a place, yeah. So I think these are just natural crossroads to come to, yeah.
There's actually a client of ours who I was talking to over a year ago, and he was talking about working hubs. that would be out of town. So, you know, people might come down from, say, Merthyr and might get off the train in Treforest and go into a hub for the day and hot desk and not come into the city centre. Well, that's kind of been brought forward and taken on a stage further, because now everybody's working from home and things have been geared up, so they don't even have to come to that hub in Treforest. They just have a decent setup in their house. So, you know, it's forced the issue, isn't it? It's taking it onto the next stage, which I guess then brings a whole new set of things, because as you say about socializing, you think, well, it's all very nice during the pandemic that everybody can work from home, but not everybody will want to work from home for the rest of their lives, because there'll be certain elements of, you know, their day-to-day life that they'll miss out on, and mental health and all the rest of it. So you then have a whole new set of issues to address, don't you?
Yeah. No, I think there, Steve, it's about trust, isn't it? It's about employers and employees, isn't it? About trust. And certainly through COVID, I've heard a lot from major employers who have seen more productivity, you know, through COVID. Yeah. And it's getting that blend right, isn't it? That people need that human interaction. You know, Laura has that through her job, didn't you? You're about that human interaction, yeah. And helping that person with their pathway, whatever they're doing, you know. And I think, yes, Steve, you're right. It is that blend of flexibility, isn't it? Yeah, where you can work from home, you can pop into the office, yeah, for a couple of days, yeah. You can do other things whilst you're there, yeah. And that's interesting about cities. You know, you're in Cardiff, is that right? Yeah, is that right?
Yeah.
You're in Cardiff, and just the future role of Cardiff. You know, where's that going to go? Yeah. You know, I still think it's really positive about Cardiff, because it's got arts and culture, it's got sport, isn't it? It's got major employers there as well. It's got Admiral, it's got it's got other big companies there, you know. But that's a big question about, you know, the role of big cities. You know, I'm in Abergavenny, and yeah, people commute from here. You know, so it's an interesting dynamic. You know.
On that then, Chris, do you see there's a potential opportunity for towns like Abergavenny and like Bargoed, which is the Valleys town I grew up in? Do you think that this is potentially a turning point for high streets like that, where perhaps they've suffered a bit from becoming commuter towns to the big cities, and people then haven't frequented their local high streets, maybe haven't socialised in them? Could they potentially be on the up in the next few years?
Yeah, it's yeah, certainly. I think the key thing in terms of that dynamic between market towns and cities is about transport and connectivity. Yeah, and where I am here in Abergavenny, it could take me to get to Cardiff about an hour and a quarter during peak time. You know, so I think there's something there for me about public transport investment, that we have choice. Yeah, that people can still go to Cardiff for a day out, or to have an evening out, or to go and see the rugby, or to go and get an item you couldn't get in a market town, perhaps. Yeah, but I think what COVID is doing now is putting that focus on the value of local and what is on your doorstep, and also with climate change as well. You know, with climate change, it's about well-being, it's about being more sustainable, it's about our carbon footprint. So for me, it's about just giving us more choice. How that will impact in terms of employment and where employers want to be based, and in terms of floor space and offices and all that, yeah, that will take time certainly to, you know, change, and there may be a need in some cities to sort of repurpose as well. So going back to Steve's point about creating more agile working space, and you know, rather than having static space per se, yeah, space that is quite adaptable as well.
I think it'll be quite interesting, actually, looking forward to see what it'll be like in 2 years, because on the one hand, it'll be interesting to see if the sort of non-city centre areas, where previously the kind of people who work from home probably were maybe one-man bands or people who just worked on their own or what have you, to a situation where a lot more people are doing that. People are part of bigger organizations where a lot more people were working from home, and they kind of make more of a life for them, like a during the weekday life for themselves locally. So they'll go out to the sandwich bar, they'll go out to the pub or the cafe locally, whereas previously they come in the city and they'd use the facilities in the city. It'd be interesting to see if that happens, or whether, as is quite often the case with human nature, everybody just goes back to what they were doing before. I don't think they will, but you never know, do you?
No, no.
Laura, does any of that ring true from the interactions you're having with the hundreds of small business clients that you work with?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, I mean, there's a couple of hundred of coaching businesses that I support in my community, and I think that you know, I don't particularly like the phrase the new normal, but I think there will be an iteration of where we're going, and I don't think we will go back to what we were doing. You know, I mean, if I take my community as an example, a lot of them were very used to working face to face, and one of the things that you know, we worked with them on during the initial pandemic was how to take your business online, how to deliver your service in a different way, still get great results, still get clients great outcomes, but do it in a different way. And I think, you know, for me, you can't beat spending time with someone that's at the coalface. You know, no disrespect to, you know, our academia, that we've got an amazing academia community in South Wales, but, you know, right now, they're not the people, in my view, to be leading small businesses. You need to be speaking to people like us that are at the coalface, who are dealing with the day to day, and that are, you know, I mean, none of us have got it perfect. I mean, I think that no, perfect doesn't exist, I think, but what we are all doing as a community in South Wales, it is really learning the true meaning of resilience, and the true meaning of being able to bounce back, and being able to think differently. I think that's a real skill that I think, you know, has really come to the fore in South Wales, for everybody, employed or self-employed or running a business, is this ability to think differently, to have your thinking challenged, and learn not to be defensive and not to take that personally, but to think, where's the opportunity, you know, that's here. So I think, certainly for me, I think great things will come out of it. And I don't think I would ever have said that on the 23rd of March when we went into lockdown, that actually I thought, you know, that there would ever be anything positive that could come out of such a large scale. And as awful as the pandemic has been, and I'm sure, like me, you know, people have lost friends and family, and that's so tragic. You know, I think what it has done has, like I say, made people think about a new normal. You know, I mean, some of my people in my community historically would only have served the South Wales market, and would only have thought about their market as being this side of the bridge. And actually now, because they've taken their businesses online and have, you know, taken the brave step, I mean, it's taken huge courage for all of us, I think, in this climate, but they've taken that leap of faith, and are actually benefiting as a result. You know, I had someone say to me just yesterday, oh my goodness, I should have done this 10 years ago. You know, so yeah, so I agree. I think there is, like I say, I can't think of a better word than new normal, as much as I don't like the phrase, you know, but absolutely, I don't think we'll ever go back to what was. I think we have moved on from that. I think, as Steve said earlier, you know, I think there were many plans to maybe go from point A to point B, and we've inadvertently gone all the way over here without even realizing, and seized massive opportunity that we didn't even know was there until we were forced to look for it. So yeah.
Chris, I want to pick up with you there on one of Laura's points. Laura talked about some of her clients who've suddenly opened up new markets for themselves by embracing the digital journey. And I've been intrigued to see some high street businesses doing this in recent months as well. So a lot of businesses have obviously needed to embrace e-commerce, maybe for the first time. And I've noticed that Crickhowell has become one of the pilot towns for a totally locally initiative to put a whole high street online so that you can shop the high street. Do you think that this is going to play a key role in the survival of our high streets going forward, and also how well they thrive? Is it a mixture of bricks and clicks?
Yeah, it's creating that online directory to raise awareness of what's actually on your doorstep, number one. So to me, it's that virtual department store, what's in your town, and then nudging you in. So a lot of it to me is about, but also social media. I think social media now, I don't know about you all, through COVID, through Facebook and Twitter and other things, Instagram, just trying to get a sense of what's out there in terms of, you know, shops and services that are being agile, that are thinking differently. So I think one is social media, about message, about personality, then getting you onto a web platform of some sort. Web platforms, as you know, can be about aggregating the offer in some way, and that can be totally locally. It could be your own town app as well. We've also got a company in Wales near me now who's also doing some work there around, you know, sort of tagging you. So when you come into a town, you get an offer, for example, or you get a certain incentive. You know, for me as a planner and as a regeneration practitioner, it is about, though, getting people out physically on the street, yeah, because once you're there, you get other linked spend as well. So I think it's a bit of both. I think definitely it's a bit of both, and I think some people are behind the curve, others are just catching up. And as Laura said, with Arcadia example, yeah, they were pretty stuck in their ways, yeah. But there's other companies that are very agile. You know, John Lewis are actually pretty agile now. Most of their sales, as we know now, are going more web and online than actually in store. So yeah.
Steve, if I can come to you on that point. So the trend, for obvious reasons, this year has been for people to move online, even if they weren't already operating like that as a business. Are there any key legal issues involved in taking that step?
So there's a bit of a mixed bag, really. And when we have clients who come to us who want to get all the bits and pieces in place for their online businesses, there's a few things they need to think about. I mean, most of the time, clients who've had a website professionally designed have normally got something called a cookie policy, which their web designers will put on their website. And some of them will have a privacy policy. So there's that whole GDPR side of things that you need to think about, particularly with online sales, because inevitably with online sales, if you're selling to particularly consumers, they're going to have to give you a lot of personal data. So that gets you into the realms of the GDPR and data protection, all the rest of it. So we have to kind of look at that as a starting point. But then I mean, that's sort of the easy bit in a way, because then you get into the tricky bit, which is the terms on which you're selling and who you're selling to. Because if you're selling to consumers via the internet, then you're not only going to be subject to consumer regulations in terms of the sort of sale of goods side of things, but you're also into sort of distance selling and all the rest of it. So there's a whole host of documentation that you need to think about, and rules and regulations, and it's all doable. But obviously, like with all businesses, if you're starting up, you know, if you've got £5,000 to spend, you don't really want to give it all to a lawyer. You probably want to buy some stuff with it. So typically we find with clients that they'll kind of kick things off themselves. They'll take some terms of business from a competitor or they found on the internet, and that will get them going. And then after a while, whether that's 3 months, 3 years or whatever, or when they've had a bit of a problem, they think, well, I better get it done properly. So most of the time, a lot of the clients we get have already traded for a while, because, you know, apart from people who are super organized and have got proper funding, they have to sort of get going and start generating income. But yes, there are a number of things they need to do. So they need to think about the privacy side of things, the GDPR. You need to think about the sale of goods side of things. And get all those documents in place, because if you're selling goods or services online, you need to make sure that, you know, you're protected, particularly if you're on selling goods as well. You've got suppliers who are selling via you. You've got to think about that back-to-back arrangements as well. You've got to think about the kind of things you're selling. I mean, if you're selling something where it's unlikely to come back at you, then you may be running into a bit less risk. But if you're selling consumables, then there's inevitable to consumers, there's going to be a higher chance that something might happen. So there are a lot of things you need to think about, and sometimes they're really basic as well. I mean, you know, we quite often will say to clients, well, if you're going to trade online, you might want to think about trading as a limited company, because it gives you a degree of protection legally. Because the last thing you want to be doing as Mr. or Mrs. Jones is trading on your own account on the internet, selling goods all over the place, because anything happens, it's going to come back and bite you personally. So there's I mean, none of it's, I use the phrase, none of it's rocket science. It probably looks a bit like that if you're a non-lawyer, but it's all doable. You know, you don't need to spend a fortune, and for a relatively small investment, you can get yourself boxed off legally.
Laura, Steve talked there about people starting up in business, and for a variety of reasons, there are people doing that right now, aren't there? What would you say to anyone considering starting their own business at this time, or somebody who had a really young business when this situation arose?
It's a great question, because I think there are currently two schools of thought out there. One is, oh my goodness, what are you doing? Get yourself in a nice secure salary and stay there and hang on to it for as long as possible. And then the other school of thought, which is, do you know what? There's never, ever, ever going to be a right time to launch a business. You know, I remember a gentleman that I used to work with who I had huge amounts of respect for, very, very experienced. And he said to me, Laura, there's two bits of advice I'll give you. And this is way before any of this drama. I mean, I set this business up in 2014, so it's been a while ago now, but it's always stuck in my head. And the first piece of advice was, no, there'll never be a right time, and no, there'll always be a reason not to. Whether it's the children, whether it's the economic climate, whether it's, I mean, goodness me, we would have been saying Brexit like 12 months ago was the reason not to start a business, you know, and that's now kind of disappeared into the ether. It's kind of going to happen, whatever's going to happen on the 31st of December, who knows, you know, but that's not our current worry. And you know, there is always going to be a reason not to do it. And I think if you've got an entrepreneurial spirit in you, if you want to paddle your own boat, if you want autonomy, independence, freedom, then actually there'll always be a reason not to. So you have to find the reason to do it. And, you know, I think there's, again, two schools of thought. Someone says to me the other day, but, you know, in the current climate, no one's spending money. And I said, rubbish, absolute rubbish. You know, you need to get good at your marketing. Need to get good at your product and service proposition. You need to do your research. You need to go and make sure that there is a demand for the product or service you want to supply. You know, I mean, Stephen talked earlier about one of his clients that's pivoting into supplying medical PPE or whatever they're doing that they wouldn't have done before. There is opportunity out there to be had. You've just got to be brave enough to do it. And the second piece of advice he said was that once you have recognized there's never going to be a right time, secondly, work out what he said to me was a 6-month survival budget, squirrel the money away, and when you've got that money, jump. And you'll be surprised how fast your parachute will open. And if it doesn't, your skill set's only 6 months out of date. Go back and do what you were doing before. You know, and it was one of those corridor conversations that I think sometimes we have, and sometimes people don't realize what a profound impact they've had on others. And I will never forget that conversation. And I think I would add a third to that, having now been in business myself for quite a few times, and that is get yourself a mentor who's at the coalface. Get yourself somebody that can take you under their wing and can, you know, guide you and can share the little hacks, that can share with you the inside stuff, but someone's that actually is doing the doing. And over the early start of my career, I was so grateful for the various cups of tea I had with people, and you know, how generous our entrepreneurial community is here in South Wales, you know, with people that are that bit further down the line that are saying, do you know what, I'll give you a helping hand, here's a step up, here's a hand, let me help you. But it's people that are at the coal face that you need to be mentored by. And I probably sound like I've got it in for academia today. I haven't. I've got huge respect for them, but you need to be with people that are doing the doing. They're the people to learn from, they're the people to guide you. And you know what, with all of those things said, that there's never a right time, put a plan in place and get yourself a mentor at the coalface. Do you know what? I think now is as good as time as any, you know, to do it. You know, I've got a lady that I'm mentoring at the moment, and all right, her business is very much in its infancy. But as I said to her, do you know what? The one thing you have when you're in that startup phase is time. And I did not realize the value of that until my business got really, really busy. And now I've got no time, you know, and actually, whilst the market may be a little bit quieter, you know, who knows, maybe we will see a shrinkage in the economy of, you know, of a size next year. I don't think that it's going to collapse, but I think we are in line for a market adjustment for sure. But actually, do you know what? Then take the time to create an amazing little business behind the scenes, test the market a little bit and get yourself ready. Because, you know, I mean, you've only got to look at the cyclical process of house properties, prices, you know, they go down, they come back up, they go down, they come back up. The economy is cyclical. So if someone was watching or listening to us today who was sat there thinking, should I, could I, would I, all that kind of stuff, you know, to me it isn't absolutely something I would still consider. I honestly would still consider that, and starting a small business is still you know, very viable opportunity. I really would.
Oh, thank you, Laura. Chris, to blatantly pinch Laura's analogy there, if somebody watching this is thinking of paddling their own boat and opening maybe a shop or a coffee shop or whatever it might be on a Welsh high street, what would your words of advice right now be?
Like Laura, do your research, first of all. Work out about the town, its catchment, its population, you know, bums on seats, you know, all that sort of stuff. Think about reputation of that town, where it is. It could be a sleeping giant. It could be something that actually could grow and become something really good. Look at the town, how it works, where people arrive, where they meet for coffee, where they sit. Yeah, walk up and down it. Also, speak to local council. They have lots of intelligence and data around shopping surveys and footfall and you know, all sorts of intelligence that's free of charge. For me, start small, have a business that has a story and a heritage around it. I'll pinch Laura's word, have the right mindset. And language is really important, and we've all used it today. Think about makers, creatives, crafters, doers, producers. They're all doing stuff, they're all action-based, yeah? And finally, someone I'm going to rob from the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce in Treorchy is create a sticky high street, a place that people stick to. And that for me is about people really, once they come to your shop front or coffee shop or business, they will stick there because of the experience. And yeah, I think all three of us have showed today about passion and focus as well, and being patient as well. Things don't happen overnight, yeah. You know, Laura's taken her 6, 7 years, whatever it is. I've been here for 7 years. Things don't happen quickly, but you keep to those values.
Thank you, Chris. And Steve, to come to you finally, what would be the practical considerations for somebody who's thinking of taking the plunge or is maybe in the early days of their small business?
Well, I would say, wouldn't I, do give some thought to the legals and give them some thought, set aside a budget and get some recommendations, and hopefully you'll find a decent solicitor who can help you within that budget. But you need to listen to people like Laura and Chris, because, you know, they're the ones who can really give you the insight. And, you know, as they've both said, there's a lot of generosity there out in the business community. There's people who talk to you, they'll have coffee with you. There's lots of events online you can go to, but really do the research. And I think if you do that and you put a little bit of time into the side that I will look after you, hopefully you won't have any nasty surprises.
That's lovely. Thank you all. So that is all we've got time for today. I'd like to thank my guests, Laura Evans of Unleash Your Potential, Chris Jones of Chris Jones Studio, and Steve Thompson of Darwin Gray Solicitors. Thank you for watching our webinar, and we will be back with more from UpStart in the new year. Thank you.